Got another update for you here coming from the MyRadar studios in Orlando on Tropical Storm Cristobal. So we've seen this storm emerge into the Gulf of Mexico as we've headed into the weekend. And if you take a look at our imagery here, infrared showing that this storm is showing a broad rotation. I know Florida's been getting a beating here. We just had a tornado warning storm move very close to our studios and actually saw a wall cloud from that. So things have been pretty hairy across the Gulf Coast for today as Cristobal makes its way northward into the Gulf of Mexico, approaching the Gulf Coast here. As we head into tomorrow is when we'll see this landfall, but we will see the impacts all the way through tonight, going into tomorrow, and probably into the better part of Monday for many areas here going northward of the Gulf Coast. So I want to show you on tropical infrared imagery here. First thing that catches your eye is that counterclockwise spin. So, you know, it's a tropical system, that is typical, but something to note is that most of those bright colors, and I should say the darker reds showing up on the screen here, are centered over Florida. There isn't much of that robust thunderstorm activity happening very close to the center of the storm. So the National Hurricane Center has their eye on that. They're saying that this resembles more of a subtropical storm at this point, so we'll probably see some rapid weakening as it approaches the coastline and as all storms do once they make landfall. But that's tomorrow, so going into tonight we can see conditions deteriorate along the northern Gulf Coast. And we've already seen a very busy day here, like I said, across some places, and mostly it's been Florida. A couple of storms creeping up through parts of Alabama and Mississippi as well. But I want to take you now to our radar sweep to show you some of the storms that we have been experiencing here this afternoon. Just a couple of bands of very strong thunderstorms moving through the area. I'll put this into motion and loop this for you now so you can get an idea of how those storms have been coming onshore here, especially on the west coast of Florida, along the Gulf Coast and inland, as these storms continue to make their way to the north and east. So it's an interesting motion here. Somebody asked yesterday during our 5-part hurricane series whether tornadoes happen with hurricanes, and they do happen. It's a cause of the rotation. The rotating nature of these storms can really cause some of that shear, somewhat of a corkscrew in the atmosphere vertically that causes these tornadoes to be possible in some of these bands that come through with the storms. So I'll draw here just an idea of where we have our main motion coming from. So we have these storms moving from the south to the north generally, but we also have some motion coming out of the west here, moving east. And so that opposing motion with these storms is what helps to spin up some of these possible tornadoes, or whether they're funnel clouds or just general rotation in these thunderstorms as they move on land. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, and the National Weather Service locally has said that this threat will stick around for much of the evening for central Florida, likely to be the case for much of the peninsula. And so the National Weather Service office, local offices have been very busy tonight coordinating with the National Hurricane Center and with the public as well to try to get the latest information out on everything here. But if we zoom in a little closer, there's a batch of storms happening in central Florida, especially off the coast of Tampa, going up I-75. Right now, moving west or east of Sarasota, has been very busy. Strong thunderstorms. The rainfall totals here have also been impressive. We've seen somewhere near 1.25 inches rain in an hour. That's the kind of rainfall rates we're seeing in some of these heaviest bands. So right now, the accumulations near Sarasota, I'll pause this so we can get a look, have been on the order of 1/2 inch in some places, and these darker shades of purple showing you really where we've gotten some of those heavier rainfall accumulations. But Cristobal is going to make its path northward here into the Gulf of Mexico. It's moving due north at 12 miles per hour, which is fairly speedy for a storm like this. It's packing winds of 50 miles per hour, maximum sustained winds, and those tropical storm force winds do extend out more than about 200 miles from the center of the storm. So as we put this into motion, you'll see most folks along the Gulf Coast, centered mostly east of Louisiana, will be feeling those impacts. Things starting to get a little windy as we head into tomorrow, and definitely the rainfall mostly isolated to the eastern side of the storm here. That asymmetry once again really catching the attention of the National Hurricane Center. So that's going to mean that conditions will be deteriorating into tonight for parts of the Florida Panhandle, the Alabama and Mississippi Panhandles as well going into tonight, and of course parts of the lower boot of Louisiana. Texas on the better side of the storm. We've had dry air wrapping into it because of a high pressure that will be steering it. So they've been relatively on the better side of the storm, I'll say. More dry than folks here on the eastern half of the Gulf Coast. But there you see the path as we head into tomorrow. We're thinking landfall will definitely be after 1 o'clock, but in the afternoon, early evening hours, as the storm approaches land, if it does begin to slow down a little bit, like I said, that high pressure to the northwest of it right now is going to play a big role in whether it slows down significantly before the next trough can pick it up and whisk it away. You see this westward track, this curve somewhat on the path here as we head into Monday is responsible because of those steering currents. So it may slow down as it approaches the coast. So just know that landfall will be sometime in the afternoon hours. We're thinking after 1, 2 o'clock local time, probably around dinner time for most folks. Into the late evening, that window is when we'll see landfall. But nonetheless, these conditions will continue to deteriorate into tonight, as I've said. And then once we get past the landfall part of it, going into the middle part of the week, the beginning of the week here into Tuesday and Wednesday, we see whatever's left of Cristobal moving northward, generally along the Mississippi River Valley, all the way through parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, getting in on the tropical moisture. So more than likely what's left of this storm will bring very heavy rainfall, tropical rainfall, maybe not so much in the winds, but the storms will dump very heavy rain as its remnants continue to move to the north up by the Great Lakes. So that's something to watch out for as we head into the beginning of the week. So lots of headaches as we head into our upcoming week here. But just want to show you the most recent watches and warnings in place. We've only got warnings, tropical storm warnings along the coastline here from the Walton-Okaloosa County line in Florida, going back towards about Morgan City here into Louisiana. So all along the coastline, expecting to see tropical storm force winds here within the next 36 hours as things pick up. So this means that you need to have your preparations complete, have all those things outside cleaned up and taken care of as the storm approaches. Now's the time to start wrapping things up so you can prepare for Cristobal to approach on the Gulf Coast here. I want to show you some video coming now out of Siesta Key. That's on the southwest coast of Florida, where we've seen the surf absolutely unpleasant here along the coastline, and it looks like we may have some trouble getting that stream up here, but the waves are really whipping on the shoreline. We saw plenty of folks out there on the coast. So something that's problematic is those currents being very rough, not something that you want to go into, so please stay off the beaches. As the storm approaches, surf's going to be absolutely miserable out there and dangerous. So if you're in the water, it'll be pretty easy to get swept off your feet and taken into the undertow, and not something that we want to do here. But now we are looking at footage out of Panama City Beach, where, again, surf not looking very great. It's a pretty dreary day out there, and these conditions are just going to continue to get worse going into the later part of tonight. So not a beach day, not a time to venture out to the coast and be curious, because that surf is very dangerous. And with that, we expect storm surge to be a very big problem with this system as it continues to push northwind in the Gulf. It's going to push some of that water with it. So because of that, we have advisories issued for that as well that expand all along the Gulf Coast. But tropical storm surge, warning in effect for this area you see here in the darker shade of magenta. We'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can get a view of that. It's going to be mostly on the eastern side of the Louisiana Boot, going from Biloxi all the way westward. By about Grand Isle, we have a storm surge watch. So that means there's a threat for the storm surge to be life-threatening. So if you live in these areas, mainly the problem here being that most of the shoreline is below sea level, so very vulnerable to storm surge being the difference between where the water should be when there isn't a storm and where it ends up being. So when you see storm surge of 3 feet, that means the water is going to be 3 feet higher than where that line usually is, and very difficult to get your bearings here when you have all this water coming on through. So definitely a danger you need to watch out for if you're in this area. And if you're not in this area and you're along the Gulf Coast, particularly, like I said, eastward of this storm along the Florida, Alabama coastlines here in the Gulf, don't expect to see great surf at all. So we have the potential for some inundation here going on into tonight and tomorrow because of this storm's approach. You'll see it there. The areas in blue, we expect to see greater than 1 foot above ground level here with the storm surge. Yellow is about 3 feet, greater than 3 feet storm surge. So places like Cedar Key, Homosassa, Horseshoe Beach, up through Perry and the Big Bend could see some of those more fragile shorelines dealing with the inundation, which is very problematic to the coastlines, especially some of the communities here that really rely on that coastline to deal with some of the local economy and everything. Could be very damaging. So we're keeping an eye out for this area as well when it comes to the storm surge and the impacts from the rough surf that Cristobal will be bringing to the area. But mainly if you are out by Louisiana, like again, I said the lower boot, that's where we have the biggest threat of storm surge that'll be coming through the area. You see that broad band area of yellow greater than 3 feet above the ground. So very problematic here, folks. You want to make your preparations now before the storm gets closer so that you can do your best to maintain that safety before the storm approaches. Now, winds, that's actually the better news that I have with this storm, because as it approaches, we don't expect the winds to be as much of a problem. Of course, tropical storm force winds can be very dangerous, but the amount of rainfall we get with this is going to be the true detriment that Cristobal brings. But take a look at some of the winds that we'll be seeing going into tomorrow morning. Things getting pretty sporty out there. Wind gusts in the 20-mile-an-hour range, a little higher in some other places. And then as the storm begins to approach into the evening, we see those gusts surging a little higher into the 30s. Tropical storm force winds, maximum sustained winds, begin at 39 miles per hour. And by 7 p.m., we could be seeing a landfall by then. We expect that will be when the storm approaches the shoreline here into parts of Louisiana, Mississippi borderline there. So something to keep in mind. Once again, anything that can become a projectile in your backyard, you want to get that hunkered down before the storm approaches so you can do what you need to do to stay safe. Now, heading into Monday, the storm will be making its way onshore and the winds quickly become less of a problem for many areas here across the coastline going into the better part of the day. So what we expect to be the big problem with the storm will be the rainfall, because especially if this thing slows down and just continues to dump rain on the coastline, that is a possibility. Right now the track taking it inland as we head into Monday, but very heavy rainfall, tropical downpours expected with this. So that in combination with a storm surge can be very problematic for these coastal communities, and it's definitely something to watch out for. In Florida, we expect some places to get a half inch up to an inch of rain going into this afternoon, and then we head into the evening hours and dump a little bit more here on the Sunshine State. Then we head over to the coastline, and you really see where the accumulations add up. Bright yellow and orange telling you where the heaviest rainfall is. We could see 3 inches heading into Tuesday morning from this. And Pascagoula there showing over 3.5 inches of rain accumulating from this storm heading into Tuesday. So most of the bad stuff, rain-wise, is going to be isolated to the eastern side of the storm. That asymmetry really a key factor here. But expect, if you are in the boot of Louisiana, the toe of the boot there along the coastline of the Mississippi or Alabama panhandles out to Florida, where the tropical storm warning is, do expect winds to pick up going on into tonight. 2 tropical storm force as we head into tomorrow with that landfall happening and heavy rains accompanied with all of this. So we've got a symphony of unpleasant conditions coming to the area as early as tonight. So like I said, folks, you want to have your preparations done as early as you can, get things all set so you can just stay home and allow this storm to pass through. My Radar will be with you through all of it. Of course, have your app handy. You can get updates through that. And if your location's on, you'll get personalized locations. And we'll have the fast forecast ready to go with everything you'll need for tomorrow. And plus, Chief Meteorologist Leslie Hudson will be joining me here tomorrow so we can walk you through this storm as landfall comes into play for tomorrow in the evening hours. But just wanted to give you an update on the latest advisory coming out at 5 p.m. We're about to get an intermediate advisory here at 8 p.m. Hurricane hunters, of course, investigating the storm heavily. And then the next full advisory from the National Hurricane Center will be out at 11 p.m. That's Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Central Time. So again, just wanted to bring you all an update on Tropical Storm Cristobal. Hope everyone's staying safe, and we'll catch you later.